June 3 and 4, Maestro, you're ending on a big note of two of the greatest pieces perhaps ever written. Um, and we're happy to have Augustin Hadelich
Augustin Hadelich, yeah.
performing on violin the famous Beethoven Violin Concerto. He only needed to write one.
Yeah, and give nightmares to all violinists in the world. I think if you ask a violinist nowadays what's the most difficult violin concerto you've ever played, and they will say the Beethoven Concerto. For various reasons. I mean, it's intonation, it's style, it's long. You have to sustain line, and it's a fantastic piece, but only if it's absolutely perfect. It's totally unforgivable, everything you do in this piece. And it's very open. You're almost naked on stage with this piece. There's nothing you can cover with showmanship, you know. And that's why we hired Augustin, because he's an extremely serious musician, fantastic violinist, with absolutely no technical limitations, but with great, deep musicianship, which you need for this piece.
And then Mahler won the Titan. I mean, if you only hear one Mahler symphony in your life and you hear one, you'll hear everything that Mahler was to evolve into.
Which is amazing, because we're talking of a young man in his early 20s writing a symphony that totally changed the symphonic language. He did with it, I think, no composer was more radical in changing the language of the symphonic literature than Mahler. And so early on. I mean, his basically, who lived at the same time, Richard Strauss, his colleague, went into a different field. You know, he went into the tone poem and used inspiration from that side, and basically left the structure of the symphony. While Mahler stayed in the tradition, totally, even structurally and in a formal way, and yet created something totally new, especially in the way he reflects on tradition and how he integrates folk and satire and irony
And lead
into the symphonic language, and the orchestration goes way beyond what Richard Strauss has even dreamed of, you know, in his early tone poems. Only later than he
You're
went.
going to have to bring in more troops.
We bring in some troops, you know. I mean, it has the famous. Well, it has 7 horns, 8, you know, and it has, you know, quadruple woodwinds and some additional percussion. It's, of course, it's big, but I think this hall deserves it. It was the piece that I did when I became music director. So my first concert was Mahler 1, and I thought, now we're finally in a hall that is ready for this, and where we can actually shine and bloom the way we should.
So talk before we close about Mahler in the same circle with Bruckner, in the same circle with the memory of Wagner.
Well,
they all seem to have brought one to the next.
Mahler relies a lot on Bruckner's thinking, though it's a completely different world and language. I mean, as a conductor, of course, he was in close contact with the work of Richard Wagner and very much influenced. But I think that Wagner's sound picture and Wagner's, the whole concept is very, very different from Wagner. Actually, so is Bruckner's. Bruckner's orchestration is very different from Wagner. He comes from the church, from the organ. And Mahler's colors are far more influenced by Berlioz and this type of language sometimes. So there's a lot of influences in Mahler that come from all directions. Also the Central European folkiness that we find in Dvorak and Janacek. actually.
And this nature.
And the closeness to nature.
Yeah.
And he's not, Wagner is this where's humanity heading, and our relation with the supernatural world. With Mahler, it is always a lot of self-reflection and suffering and reflecting with nature and sometimes, because of his songs, the Knabenwunderhorn, it's based on very naive old poetry that he used, and in a very good sense, sometimes it's the child in us that Wagner brings out. So, especially in the first symphony, I think this when you see this or you hear the slow movement, which is basically a parade of the animal of the forest carrying the hunter to the funeral. I mean, and this comes from a very naive drawing, which is actually quite cute to see. I mean, if you see you see the little animals carrying the hunter to his own grave, and how they mourn him, of course. This irony in it. It's quite naive in a certain way, but of course, yet it is so profound, and he is the master of that, finding profound meaning in the very simple things. And the rising of nature in the beginning is just magic. Yeah. And then, of course, there is not a finale that is as powerful as Mahler 1. Yes, there's Mahler 3 and probably Mahler 2, yeah. And Mahler 6.
And 9.
Well, 9
and
is
10.
A very complete...
And 10 that he didn't think that he'd ever write, but he did.
Well, 9 is a complete opposite of an ending. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's your season ender, too.
Yeah. So it's going to end with a bang and very loud.
Thank you, Maestro. That's Mahler's Titan Symphony No. 1 and Beethoven Violin Concerto with Augustin Hadelich performing on violin June 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Adding a Sunday there. Thank you, Maestro.